Yeah, and it's really simple. Like with the calorie cycling, if you're 4 weeks out of a contest and you're so exhausted, you can barely stand up, you think, I can't make it. And your coach says, okay, have a cheat meal. How do you feel the next day? You feel great. You got tons of energy, best workout of the prep. Now imagine you can refine that even further. And instead of just a random cheat meal, you supply the exact nutrients to amplify those effects as much as possible.
This video is for educational entertainment purposes only. Hey everybody, I'm here today with Justin Harris. Justin is a world-renowned bodybuilding coach, the owner and founder of Troponin Nutrition, and holds a master's degree in atomic physics, which I think that they only give out to the smartest and the maddest of scientists. So really excited to speak with you today, Justin.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. So we're going to talk through carb cycling. I think that's where we'll start.
All right.
I know you've spoken about this a lot, but I'm hoping we can kind of drill down and give people some practical explanations and takeaways.
Yeah,
I also know
sure.
that you personally are someone who's into first principles thinking. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping we can kind of start with really basic examples, stuff that is very easy to understand, and use that to derive some principles. So let me lay out a couple scenarios. This will make more sense the longer I talk. Let's imagine like a basic guy, 30-year-old guy, name is Jack, right? He's been lifting 5 to 10 years. He is not on performance enhancing drugs, metabolically healthy, etc. Right now, he's on maintenance calories. He's going to be on maintenance calories for the next year. Let's ignore the kind of macronutrient breakdown. He's just on maintenance calories. If he does this for a year, what body composition changes would we expect to see, if anything, in this guy?
Well, it's hard to quantify it, but you will see changes, and I'll explain why I go with the first principle. So it all comes down to thermodynamics. We're an open thermodynamic system, energy in, energy out. It's no different than your car or electricity. You put gas in your car, and it burns that fuel until the fuel's gone. If you don't burn all the fuel, you have that fuel remaining in your body. And people, don't like calories in versus calories out, but that's not a nutrition statement at all. That's conservation of energy. A calorie is just a unit of energy. We just apply it to food. We don't have to. We could use joules or any other, Newton meters probably somehow if we did enough conversions. And so that's all it is. And so you eat some amount of energy, and if you burn that amount of energy, none remains. If you don't burn all that energy, however much energy is left over is somehow stored in the body. If you burn more than you eat, you pull energy from your body. That's all it is. Where people get wrong with calories in versus calories out is they only count the calories in. You'll see on the internet all the time, I ate 1,200 calories a day and didn't lose weight. One, you probably didn't eat 1,200 calories a day, but that just means you didn't burn more than 1,200 calories. That's all it means, And it gets more complex because, some percentage of the calories aren't digested. They make it to the small intestine, and that varies a little bit from person to person. And then the macronutrient breakup matters a little bit, because we don't really use protein for energy. We eat protein. Some of it is used to synthesize protein structures in the body. The leftover gets converted to glucose through gluconeogenesis. And, if you convert something, it takes energy. If I have a bunch of blocks and I want to move them to a different structure, it takes energy to do that. Well, then if they don't get burned as glucose, they might get converted to fatty acids and either stored or used that way, which then takes more energy. And so that's why protein is thermogenic, like up probably 10, 15, about 15% usually. And in really extreme cases, maybe 30% of the calories at an absolute limit from protein are actually burning the digestion of them. But so taking that structure of we have some calories, and if you take it over the course of a week, whatever that number is, just X, and you eat those calories. Well, we can kind of hack the system with carb cycling because we eat calories in one form, basically. I mean, we eat them in all the macros, but we just ingest them as calories, but we store them 3 different ways. We store them as protein, which is, muscle. We store them as carbohydrates as glycogen. We store it as fat, And so we have this 3 bins we can go into. And so what I do with carb cycling is I say we can't break conservation of energy. It'd be great if we did, because we wouldn't be dependent on big oil. We wouldn't be dependent on electricity. Every single thing. If we could break it, you and I would be the first trillionaires in the world. We'd win the Nobel Prize tomorrow. And the whole world would. We'd have unlimited energy. We could invent warp drives, travel faster than the speed of light. All these amazing things. So that's not what happens. So we're bound by this boundary condition of how many calories we eat, how many calories we burn. But we can hack that a little bit with those 3 storage systems. So if I eat, and I'll take it makes more sense. It's clearer when you're losing fat. And so I'll use that. So we say we eat in 1,000 calorie deficit every day. Over 7 days, that's 3,500 calories, which would be a pound of fat if every calorie was burned as fat. But it's not. We burn glucose first, glycogen. So we're working out, and whatever exercise you're training, you burn glycogen from that muscle. You burn liver glycogen to maintain stable blood glucose levels, and that gets depleted. What happens when that? You have less energy, less easy energy sources. Glycolysis is the first easy energy source. It's the second, it's creatine phosphates first, but it's the easy energy source we use for everything. And it kind of upregulates thyroid function and does all these good metabolic things. When we get depleted in glycogen, we lose that. Our NEAT decreases because we have less energy. Our strength decreases. We have less glycogen. Our thyroid production probably decreases. So we burn less calories. So we don't want that to happen. And that's why diets start to stall out. So what I do is instead of that 1,000 calories spread out over 7 days, I take that same deficit, maybe I spread it into 6 days. And then on one of the days, I eat very, very high carbohydrates. And it's actually a surplus day. We're eating more calories than we burn, even though we're dieting. So we are storing those calories. We're not losing fat. We're not losing energy from the body. We're storing it. But because we supplied those calories from carbohydrates in a state where we were depleted in glycogen, there's a preferential state where the body is going to store those extra calories as glycogen rather than fat. So we are storing calories. We're eating more than we burn, but we've created a situation where those calories will be stored as glycogen rather than fat. Upregulates thyroid function, restores glycogen stores, your training doesn't suffer, your energy stays high, your NEAT across the week stays elevated. You burn more total weekly calories, so we have the same total net deficit for the week, but this one day we hack the system. And how much of a difference, I can't say because there's a lot of little things going on. When insulin's bound to a cell, it shuffles some proteins around in the cell, which causes almost like opening the drain in your shower. And so it brings nutrients into the cell. Mm-hmm. And so in that state, we have elevated insulin. So those cells bound with insulin are slightly more likely to take in amino acids and synthesize new protein. It might only be a few milligrams a day, but over a year, that adds up. And so we increase glycogen storage. Maybe we super compensate a little bit. So there's all these things going on that kind of hack the system, and it's not a dramatic hack. On our deficit days, we might be at 1,000 or 1,200 calorie deficit, a huge deficit. We're not doing 1,200 calories of that. We're talking on the order of a handful of calories. However, you take the two cases, same, this person has a weekly deficit, this person has a weekly deficit. So we're the same weekly calorie deficit, only in this case, maybe it's not much, maybe it's 10 calories of protein synthesis, maybe, but you extend that out, mm-hmm. and that's when you really start getting the difference because it doesn't take much, 10 pounds of muscle, true muscle will completely change the way your body looks. Well, 10 pounds of muscle is only like 2.5 grams of protein synthesis a day. So we can even just hack it. And so if we can do half that, if we can only get 1 to 2 grams of extra protein synthesis a day from this hack, we're talking 5 pounds of muscle a year. Now, 5 pounds of muscle, each pound of muscle is about 50 extra calories that it burns over the course of a day because muscle is active tissue. It takes calories to stay alive. So now at the end of a year, maybe we've only gained 5 pounds of muscle by doing this, but it's the same calorie intake and we've added more muscle and our metabolism is now 250 calories higher. So the future diet, if we keep everything the same, not only is the carb cycling hack improving things from the base, but we're improving it from a higher metabolic rate. So now we have the same deficit plus a 200 calorie a day metabolism boost, and that's 1 year, you're 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, it really starts to pay off. And I think you see it to where when I started this, in the late 90s, it's not like I invented carb cycling. No, I came upon it through first principles. So I came upon it independently, but people have rotated calories, changed macros throughout since people started knowing what a calorie was. It's not like I invented that, but people I don't think were doing as extreme. You used to see carb cycling with 100 calories a day, 200 calories a day, carbs a day, 300 grams of carbs a day. Where I do it, like my high days are sometimes over 1,000 grams of carbs, because we're trying to, someone like a high level bodybuilder might store 1,000 grams of glycogen. We're not going to deplete, and I'll do to give it actual numbers. I'll say it.
Yeah, please.
Say say we deplete half that, just round numbers. So we deplete 500 grams of glycogen over the course of a week. That's a lot, but let's say we do it. We're really flat. And let's say if you have a metabolism to where you can eat 220 grams of protein and 500 grams of carbs with minimal fat, and that's your baseline, that's your BMR. Well, now we add 500 grams of carbs on top of that. Now you're eating 220 grams of protein, 1,000 grams of carbs. And so 500 grams of those carbs are burned just on our diet. Those extra 500 grams are then stored as glycogen. So we've created a state where we ate 1,000 grams of carbs, and theoretically, none of them are stored as fat. And so, those are the real benefits. It's the small increase in muscle protein synthesis benefit we get from the insulin and the carbs, the small boost in metabolic rate across the week because we're not depleted in glycogen, the small calorie increase in training because we have more glycogen to fuel training, the thyroid upregulation over time it doesn't drop on a diet, ours stays more stable. And so those things just start compounding. And it's like investing or anything where, if you have someone do a stable calorie deficit diet for a week and a carb cycling diet for a week, you're not going to notice a difference. What maybe there's 100 milligrams of difference. So those are the things you might not notice right away, but you have someone do that for 10 years, you're going to have a dramatically different physique. And I think that's why if you look around, it's really pretty standard. Even people who say they do static calories, the same calories every day, you'll see they still do something like a cheat meal here and there, or they do something with a similar protocol. And I think because people realize through trial and error or coaching or working with someone, or just they've been doing this long enough, they know that when they periodically have a really high calorie meal, a real high calorie day, a really high carb meal, something like that, over time they've noticed that their progress is better. And it is true, and it's like you can't put a number on it, but even if I can guarantee you're going to be a half a pound of muscle bigger and a half a pound of fat leaner every year, I've been in this sport over 30 years, if I'm doing a half of it, we're talking that even that tiny difference, we're talking, I have 15 pounds of extra muscle and 15 pounds of less fat. That's the difference between dead last place and winning the overall, or more than that difference. That's the difference between taking last place at a state show and turning pro. So it's really a dramatic difference over time.
For sure. Let me say this back a little bit more simply, and then ask you a question. So I think I'm hearing kind of three primary benefits. One is to restore glycogen. Two is to acutely improve athletic performance on a training day or the subsequent training days. And then three, it's to reverse some of the metabolic adaptations that occur as a result of dieting. Correct. So the question is this, in the scenario you laid out, and typically how people do carb cycling, it's maybe 1, maybe 2 days, right? If a guy's particularly big, maybe he needs multiple high days in a week. But to kind of play the devil's advocate, is that sufficient time scale to reverse the metabolic adaptations of a diet? Would it perhaps make more sense to do 4 weeks of depletion and then a week of essentially back at baseline and above to truly get those metabolic processes rolling at full speed?
So we have to define it. What are the metabolic processes and what affects their decline? So if you're depleted in glycogen, you're going to have less strength, less energy. So right away on day one, the day you're depleted in glycogen to any level, there's some reduction in performance. Now, again, if you're depleted a few grams, it's not going to be just, things like your, neural excitement, how excited you are, how much sleep you had, those things are going to overplay it. But by the time you get across the whole week, if you're 500 grams of glycogen depleted, absolutely you're going to start seeing a decrease in performance and a decrease in these things. Well, we just showed a case where we did replace those 500 grams in one day. And that's really the benefit, is that we're replacing glycogen, which is a real quick turnaround. If we were trying to do something with muscle, you can't do that because muscle growth is such a slow process. Fat's pretty similar. You can gain fat really quick, but it still takes a lot of calories. You can't eat it's not like you can't add 6 pounds of, because you can add multiple pounds of glycogen in a day. It takes a lot of food to do that in fat, and it's impossible to do that with muscle. So it's kind of a lucky trait, kind of like how the fact that water is a universal solvent, or that it increases in volume when it freezes as opposed to everything. Like, it's like one of those weird things like, man, we wouldn't exist if this wasn't the case. Well,
Not the universe is built this way.
Yeah, carb cycling wouldn't work if we had a protein cycle. The system falls apart. And so it's lucky in that it's a specific nutrient that acts a certain way that we are able to do those things in the short term, like in a week.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think the key detail is that glycogen is an important driver of performance. I like what you highlighted about neural drive, right? We can overcome small
Hmm.
degradations in performance as a result of glycogen depletion, but it is hard and mentally straining. And at some point, people break, right? I
Yeah.
think that's very
And
clear.
there's only so much you can overcome. I mean, if you've ever been 2 weeks out of a contest and completely depleted, it don't matter how fired up you are for your workout, you're not overcoming that, you know? And you can overcome a lot. And an example I always use with that is like how important is sleep for performance. And I argue it's for hypertrophy, it's negligible at all, at best. I mean, most top bodybuilders I've known, like Ronnie slept like 5 hours a week. Most bodybuilders are kind of known for not being big sleepers. Some of them are, but there's no one-to-one correlation. This guy slept more, he built more muscle. And then if you look at like how many world records across history were broken after a night of really good sleep. No, everyone's nervous the night before Olympics or the Super Bowl or any event, you know. So pretty much every world record that you're fond of was broken by someone who probably didn't sleep that well the night before. So, you know, we can overcome quite a bit.
Definitely. So one thing you brought up earlier, right? You talked about insulin's role in this process. Again, I think this would be very difficult to quantify, but if we're able to apply exogenous insulin, do you
Mm.
think that that can make carb cycling more effective?
Oh, absolutely, and absolutely, and because you're forcing those issues to happen sooner, more strongly, you know. And again, insulin isn't magic. You know, there's always the debate. It's anabolic, not anabolic. I guess it technically is anabolic, but not in the typical pathway people think. It's got a weird pathway where there is some direct anabolism. But what it really does is it increases it increases amino acid absorption at that cell, increases the glycogen storage, so it's indirectly anabolic. It allows, if you're created a state of anabolism, it supplies the nutrients, supplies the infrastructure to fuel that better than if you didn't have it. Yeah, so you absolutely can utilize insulin to the benefit. And again, it's that small difference. But you know, if you, and this is just numbers. I'm just reverse engineering this. If you took someone and the actual number is I think 19 pounds. If you took 19 pounds, turn that into grams, you know, 2.2, you know, gram, what a kilogram per, yeah, what, you know, you convert all that, you divide it by 365, and you take the fact that only about 30% of your cross-sectional area of your muscle is actual contractile tissue. If you break that down, 19 pounds divided by 365 days, and then 30% of that number is like 5 grams a day. 5 grams of protein synthesis is almost 20 pounds of muscle in a year. 5 grams. So you're eating 300, 400 grams. If you can just add 5 more grams of synthesis, you're getting 40 pounds in 2 years. You're doing John Jewett, you know, from when he went from middleweight to
Yeah,
heavyweight.
yeah.
You're doing like complete,
Once in
absolute.
a lifetime
Yeah,
transformation.
yeah. And so that's 5 grams a day. So yeah, you're not, it's hard. You can't guarantee it's going to happen. You're creating the state where it's more likely to happen, but you don't need much to happen. You know, if you can increase the muscle protein synthesis by 1 gram a day, you can't even count your protein down to 1 gram because the food label is only required to be accurate to 20%. And protein is meat, which is animals. And so, you know, you eat chicken and it gives you a protein and fat content. But that doesn't mean every chicken that's ever been born has the exact same body fat. So those numbers are just estimates. You can't even guess your protein down to the gram. So you have, you know, so it's a tiny, tiny amount. But if you can add 1 gram a day, you're talking, what is that? 4 pounds of muscle a year, just from like 1 gram of protein a day. So, you know, it's one of those things that, and most of the things in the sport, and that's why I always wonder why bodybuilders aren't better investors or aren't more into investing, because it's the same thing. You keep, you know, doing this thing and nothing seems to be happening, but the results come from when it compounds over time. And that's why growth hormone is so potent. You take growth hormone, yeah, you gain 10 pounds of fullness and it seems great, but that's really all it does. And it's not really anabolic. But what does it do? It increases fatty acid oxidation. So you burn more fat. So you have the exact same calorie intake without growth hormone and with growth hormone. The person with growth hormone is going to burn slightly more fat from those same calories. Well, those calories don't disappear. So if you burn 10 calories of fat, those 10 calories have to be stored in some other form, whether it's glycogen or muscle. And that's something that builds up. That's why I always say growth hormone's amazing, and it really is. But people take it and they think they're going to take it for 8 weeks and look different. No, you're going to look full for 8 weeks, and then when you stop, it's going to go away. But now you take it for 8 years and you get that little benefit for 8 years, it's a completely different physique.
AJ here. If you're enjoying this interview, please consider subscribing to the channel, as it makes a huge difference. And if you're looking to transform your body and your mind without jeopardizing your health, consider hiring me as a coach. Links in the video description. Appreciate you. Yeah, the compounding interest over time. Like you said, that makes perfect sense. One thing you brought up, right, that muscles aren't just made out of contractile tissue. There's a number of substances there, right? Most of it's water.
Most of it's not, yeah.
And I would add, I think that there is a clear kind of psychological benefit to things like carb cycling because you fill back out. And that makes an enormous difference in how people feel and perceive themselves.
Oh, yeah. Everyone hates how they look when they're flat in prep. Well, imagine being like getting lean, but super flat, hating your look, and then eating 1,000 grams tomorrow and waking up tomorrow full vascular, your skin pulled tight, you feel great. You got energy. So then that's another thing that's not quantitative, quantifiable, but you're going to burn more calories across the week from that.
Definitely. And I think there's a clear psychological benefit to having more variety in your diet anyway. You mentioned this earlier. People sort of naturally carb cycle regardless. Maybe they're calorie cycling, not necessarily carb cycling, but having some ability to fluctuate your calories, spend time with human beings and have an off-plan meal, I think can pay huge dividends as well. Especially, again, this point you're making again and again, which is so good. People are trying to compound these small benefits. Yeah. So anywhere you can get an edge anywhere is going to pay off in the end.
Yeah, and it's really simple. Like with the calorie cycling, if you're 4 weeks out of a contest and you're so exhausted, you can barely stand up. You think I can't make it, and your coach says, okay, have a cheat meal. How do you feel the next day? You feel great. You got tons of energy. Best workout of the prep. Well, yeah. So now imagine you can refine that even further. And instead of just a random cheat meal, you supply the exact nutrients to amplify those effects as much as possible. No one's going to argue that if they've been dieting for 12 weeks and they eat a cheat meal, that they don't have more energy the next, for the next couple of days, or get better workouts, or aren't sweating the next day from their metabolism spiked.
Yeah, very true. I'm curious about this. Maybe this is too far of an overstatement, but in my mind, the bigger and the more enhanced and the more calories a person is consuming, the more potential benefit this approach has. Simply because we're scraping for percentage points. And if I'm taking a very small percentage of a bigger thing, I'm going to get a bigger thing. Because in my mind, the 150-pound natural guy who's only consuming 2,200 calories a day, I don't know that, I'm not saying he shouldn't do this, but I don't know that there's as much benefit to be derived because it's almost as if the stakes are lower and there's fewer opportunities there.
It's proportionally, I would say, argued like pretty much the same benefit, possibly, but it's proportion. It's a percentage benefit, and that's really, I talk a lot about second bodybuilding, and most people never get to it because it's a really advanced stage. But when you do these things long enough and you've built so much, you do your first contest prep and it's starvation. You just feel like you're just stranded on a deserted island and trying not to starve to death. First preps are starving, tired, hunger. That's all your thoughts are, fatigue, hunger, starving. But you could talk to the guys the top 5 prepping for the Olympia this year, and it's not like they're full, but their prep isn't that. They're not just straight starving. It's more being extra precise with the food, and that's because they have so much more muscle, their body's so much more responsive, their calorie intake so much higher. And so it's I say like bodybuilding is really weird because a lot of the things we do, it's like the little things that you can't really notice in any short term that add up. But then also it's kind of not that way because it's also like it starts compounding, and that the further along you get, the faster things kind of happen for you. You stay leaner in the off season, so you don't have to lose as much fat in prep. So prep's easier, and then you get leaner easier, and your metabolism's higher, and so you don't get as fat after the show. And then just kind of everything kind of it's like a weird thing in that the further you get along in the sport, it's almost like the easier it gets to keep getting better. To a point. Obviously with muscle size, there's a limit, but.
Yeah, there's other complications there for sure. Yeah. Broderick Chavez used this metaphor I really like, where it's essentially the longer you've done this for, you've already established a lot of the machinery for it. You've built the supply chain, right? So even though you're still shipping from China to the United States, that still takes a while. If you've already got the boats, if you've already got the factories, if you've already got the people hired, it's going to be easier to move all that stuff. And I think that on a
Yeah,
metabolic level, right?
there's additional things too. Like if you think your first like why is it getting striated glutes so hard? But then if you ever notice, once guys finally get like if a guy's kind of becomes an up and coming bodybuilder and he's known for having soft glutes, if he finally gets his glutes in, it seems like they're never an issue anymore. And if you think about it, and there's no research on this, it's not like anyone's doing that. But if you think about it, we're born with some number of fat cells and they grow and shrink. Well, the fat on your ass has been there since you were a baby. It's never been gone. And so if that's one of the last places to lose, you do that first diet, that fat hasn't, you haven't shrunk those cells since you were born. So that's going to be the last place. But you almost have to over diet the first time to get striated glutes. But if you do get that and you burn those fat cells, because to burn fat, the fat has to get in the bloodstream to be utilized. And so like a lot of times like low blood flow areas like glutes or love handles or lower back, they're low blood flow areas. They're probably not getting that fat's not you burn fat systemically, but again, over time, if you can increase the blood flow, that's why like the step mill seems to be really good. You're just bringing blood to the glutes all the time, and you're burning fat because you're burning calories, you're in a deficit, so there's a higher blood flow to the glutes. There's maybe some potential that slightly more fat from that area is used for energy, and so it's all these weird things, but once you get that fat off the glutes, it's almost like the body knows or learns or remembers. It's not so restrictive or so against burning it in the future, and that is what seems to happen. You get whatever your weak part is, that last spot that you can't get in. Once you do get it lean, it comes in pretty much like on target, on path with everything else. So your first show, you'll see weird things like guys will have prostrations in their quads and no abs, and that was me. Or you'll see guys have shredded upper body but still fat, chunky ass. But then you watch that same person, and 10 years later, now maybe they're a top national competitor or a pro bodybuilder, and you follow their prep progress, and the fat loss seems way more consistent across the body.
I also tend to see that fat distribution post a really hard diet changes too.
Oh yeah,
Right?
yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
Once you lose it once, it comes back. Again, it depends. I'm sure there's hormonal issues too, but it seems to come back more evenly across the body.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, we do everything systemic, and it goes back to the blood flow. If you really think about it, the thinking that you could guarantee as you add fat, it's going to add the exact same cells to the exact same percentage against other cells as it did before. It's pretty much zero. Even if the body did try to gain it exactly evenly, it's just there's so many cells, it's not going to be able to.
I want to hone on that point because I do think that people tend to forget that so much of biology, there is randomness, right? Like we are not actual machines where you can put in a direct input and get the same predictable output at all times. And
Well,
so
you can go even farther down the line. Everything is randomness. Every single atom in your body has some probability at this moment of being anywhere in the universe. The most probable location is the center of a Gaussian distribution at the point where we classically view it. We see it. And because we see so many atoms at any given time, we see quadrillions of them. We see that some average where, if one atom maybe is over on Jupiter, you would never know because but everything's that way, like follow Brownian motion, or if you get deep into physics and do statistical mechanics and you learn that, wow, without any real predictive classical data of linear predictivity where you say like, I know my position, my starting position, and I know my velocity. I can tell you where I'm at any given time. The real world is nothing like that. Yeah. But with probability calculations from quantum mechanics, we actually get more accurate data, more accurate, even though it's not exact, I can tell you if you're going 50 miles an hour east, I can tell you where you're going to be in an hour, you're going to be 50 miles away. But a mile is a big number. With an atom, I can't tell you exactly where it's going to be, but I can tell you it's most likely in this point to like 1,000 decimal places, which is obviously way smaller than a mile. So it's like our brains just really aren't like, because everything we do is pretty predictive. I set an alarm, it's going to go off. My work starts at this time. If I'm not there, I'm going to get yelled at. So we live in a predictive classical world, but nothing is that way. Underneath it all is all probability. And you're seeing it now with AI, because that's a lot, large language models. That's really kind of what they're doing, is they're taking all this data and picking basically the most probable answer, which would be the point of that, normal distribution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are pattern recognition machines. And we see patterns where none truly exist. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise, the universe is so chaotic and random that if we truly acknowledged it, we'd probably be functionally insane. right? Like,
Oh, yeah. Well, having an AI company now, I'm learning how, and I noticed this because I have a Tesla, I have a couple Teslas, but I was using full self driving on the highway, and I'm coming up in a car, and I drive too fast, but they're maybe going 80, and I got it. The fastest you can do full self driving is 85. Well, I go 85, and so it does everything. It puts the turn signal on, it switches lanes for me. I'm not touching anything. I pass it, and then when the car gets far enough ahead of the other car that it has whatever 4 car length space, it goes back into that lane. But what you can't predict with AI and probability and large language models or whatever, like whatever probabilistic system you're doing, is you have to somehow be able to program in the fact that humans are assholes. Well, what happens if you pass a car on the highway? Not even consciously, if they're doing 80 and you start passing them, if they're not on cruise control and they see your car go faster, they're not even trying to be a dick, but it's like a weird thing that happens. Now they're going 82. Well, the Tesla doesn't know that. The computer's not an asshole. And so I've noticed that when it gets back over, by the time I get in that lane, that car's right on my ass, thinking I'm an asshole. Like, oh, you passed me and now you're going to slow down. It's like, no, I was the same speed the whole time. You have the humanistic nature of you see a car passing you without even realizing. Some people are assholes and they do get mad and speed up, but without even realizing, you kind of naturally do that. And then when a car's in front of you, you kind of naturally speed up to the pace of that car. And like with AI stuff, that's not you can't train that. How do you train the natural human competitiveness or assholeness or whatever it is that causes us to do that? It's kind of like merging onto the freeway. And I remember I heard a comedian one time tell a hilarious joke. It was I won't do the whole premise, but it was like when you're wiser, like you have two wives that are friends, and the husbands have to get together and they don't have anything to talk about. And this guy's telling the story, and so he's kind of telling, well, what was your day like? He's like, oh, it was a pretty good day. I found a new way to get to work. I took a couple different roads, and the other guy's like, oh yeah. And, well, how's your day? Oh, it's really not so great, but started off good. I blocked some guy from merging on the highway this morning, so that was nice. And you notice that too, because when the Tesla's merging on, if that space is open, because the mergers, it's the guy merging, it's his job to find space. It's not people to allow you in, and they won't. They'll try to block you, and you'll see that with the Tesla. I'm merging at a certain speed, and it can do all the calculations, and it knows that when I get onto the highway, I will be in between these two cars. But I never am, because that car that I would have been in front of realizes I'm going to get in front, and he speeds up a little bit. Even if he's not thinking, I got to block this guy. It's like a subconscious thing, and you can see like the AI in the Tesla not understand that. Yeah, well, why is there a car? They're not supposed to be there. And you can't. How do you train that? You train it. Humans are dicks or competitive, or it's like there's not even a word for what that is. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I am the dick who will speed up. I will cop to that here for sure.
Without even realizing, I do it every time, and because now I pay attention to that, and I'm like, man, I did it too. I wasn't even. It's like subconscious. The cars, because I think you're driving, and then this car's going fast. It makes it feel like you're going slower, because that car that was kind of with you.
It's the frame of reference, right?
Yeah, and so it's weird how it all works with that, but yeah, everything comes down to, at the end of the day, it's all non-exact, all probabilistic, but the actual answers you get from a non-exact probability answer are more precise than the exact answer from a classical perspective.
100%. All right, I'm going to ask you one last carb cycling question, I promise, and then we'll be done with it. So if someone wants to approach this for the first time, if they want to set up a carb cycling diet or something that's more cyclical, what's kind of an easy starting point or heuristic? Again, everyone's going to be individual, right? This is going to vary, but how should someone conceptualize this and maybe pick starting numbers or a starting approach?
Well, I'll plug my stuff. Plug
your stuff.
Honestly, the easiest thing, and I wish, it's like people don't even believe this because it seems too good to be true. Troponin IQ is our AI system that's my full knowledge base. It's $29.99 a month. If you go to it right now and you fill out your profile with all your stats, and the more you fill it out, the more exact the result. For $30, you say, write me a diet with whatever parameters you want, and then a second later, it'll give you the full diet. You can say, put it in a spreadsheet form. And you can ask it tomorrow. You can say, hey, these are my new stats. Write me another new diet. And it'll do a carb cycling diet, and it'll be as precise as working with a top coach. So that's the best, because it's $30. I mean, I know money's not nothing, but you're going to trial and error yourself into way more than $30 by mistakes if you try to do it from scratch on your own. So the next kind of question would be like, how advanced is this person? If this person's never dieted at all, I would say don't even try to jump into that. If you do, either work with a coach or like you, I really can't stress enough how incredible Troponin IQ is. If you ask it that, it's going to give essentially the same answer as I would give as a coach. There's, I'm not, it's not going to do the body assessment and stuff for future updates, but it will. If you're a little more advanced than that and you have some experience with dieting and you know what your metabolic rate is, you know how you tolerate foods, then you can play with it even more, a little bit. Then you just take, say your BMR is 3,000 calories. Now let's do 2,800, let's do maybe 3,000 calories a day on your training days. On your off days, drop it down to 2,500 calories. Now you have 1,000 calories to play with and place those as carbs on your high day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great basic setup for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about Troponin IQ, because I know that you used to have, and maybe you still do, you used to have spreadsheets, right, that you sold as kind of your basic model.
Yeah. Oh man, and it's crazy because those are selling like crazy. The sales of those have skyrocketed since Troponin IQ, and it's hilarious to me because, and I've made a couple prompts that I want to integrate as buttons. So there'll be a massive and a shredded button. So people buy these diets for $100, and you put in, but that's just based on your lean body mass, your height, weight, estimated body fat. It's really good, but I had to write some kind of algorithm that would work for 100-pound females and 400-pound ex-offensive linemen, And so for most people, and for a full, standard deviation around the norm, it's going to be pretty darn accurate. But it is only one data point, your lean body mass. Troponin IQ is going to take, everything. It's going to take what you said your current diet is, what your progress has been, what your, how, way more things. What your training is like. It's going to kind of guess what your calorie output is from training, and so it's going to give a more detailed answer. But yeah, it's I can't remember. I think I went off on tangent. I forgot what the actual question was now.
No.
Yeah, we still sell those. But yeah, and I'm working on prompts, and I think I posted one on Professional Muscle for Massive, and it's kind of long because you have to because you have to tell it you want in an Excel spreadsheet, you have to tell it you want macros, you have to tell it you also want a full meal plan that fits those macros, and then also tell it that you want 4 or 5 additional meal examples for every meal that also fits those macros. But it'll do it, and if you go to there's a thread on Professional Muscle that has I think I posted the exact a prompt that'll output the massive diet. So if you want to buy massive, and I'm saying this, I lose money on this. I lose 3.5 times more money every time someone buys massive, and then they don't get because you can get all my books on Troponin IQ. You can get shredded, you can get everything in comprehensive performance nutritions, but take $30, buy Troponin IQ, go to Professional Muscle, copy and paste that prompt into the Troponin IQ. You're going to need it's going to give a better answer the more information you listen to your profile, just like with your coach when you fill out, kind of a starting form, and it'll output a spreadsheet, exact same as Massive, exact same style, but even better, it'll be better than Massive. And one of the person commented, they said, I don't know if I like this Troponin IQ. I've been using Massive, and I asked it to write a diet like Massive, and some of the numbers were a little different. And they thought that meant it was worse. I was like, that means it's better. Yeah, it saw where Massive failed by only using one data point for the algorithm, and it refined on it further.
So I'm not an expert on LLMs, but one thing I found just as a casual user is that the math isn't often correct, right? So really basic, like if you give them, say, give me a meal plan for a 2,000 calorie day, and it'll chop up the meals, it won't actually total 2,000. So is that my fault?
And that's one of what I think it can be, because it is, because it's not thinking. It's responding to your prompt, and that's why it doesn't get that's why my Tesla doesn't understand merging on the on-ramp, because it's not thinking. It's just, so the better your prompt is, the better the answer will be. But also, and this is why I think early on, eventually we'll probably get AGI, and we'll have an AI system that's just completely intelligent, and then everyone's fucked. All of us. Whoever owns that, that's the guy that discovers free energy. But until then, like with ChatGPT or Grok, they're amazing, but they have to answer everything. So that whatever you ask it, it's taking the most probable answer basically from the internet. Well, the internet's mostly stupid, So for generic things, like what's the temperature going to be? What's the capital of this? Where's the alternator on my car? How many PSI should my Chrysler Sebring be? The tires, those things. But if you ask it a really specific question in a niche topic, it's going to pull from all these idiots that have spoken on it. Where and the example I've been using is like, if you can go to any of those chat things, and if you're a programmer, say you write code in Python, and I've used this analogy a couple times, so hopefully it's not annoying yet, but you write code in Python, you got to analyze some data, you don't want to write the code, so you say, hey, ChatGPT, write me a Python script that'll analyze this data. And it'll output something, and it'll probably work. It might have some errors, like you said, with the numerical stuff. Well, now imagine you could do the same thing, but instead of asking ChatGPT, you can go ask the lead Python programmer at Google. You're going to want his answer because it's going to be the best. Well, that's why I think early on AI is going to be, is that until there's AGI, being decent at everything is all they can do. But you can be an expert and be incredible at certain areas, and that's what we've done. If you ask it with alternators in your car, it's going to say, look, I'm a fitness expert. And we thought about putting some of my physics into it, but it was like, no one's going to ask it. And memory and server space and like API, they start getting up there. So we just did fitness, but my AI is trained only on fitness, and it's trained only on correct data from an expert. It's not, I ask it, so I compare it a lot, all of them, Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, any of them. I can't remember all the names anymore, but I'll ask them like a peak week for bodybuilding, and you'll get, every time you ask ChatGPT, you're going to get a different answer. Some of them are okay. Some of them might work, but I've seen some that say cut off sodium. I said some that say dropped in 1 gram of sodium at 10 days out. Say some that say, it's like slam sodium, and then it has like a weird titration down. And none of those things are really right. And they can be not bad, given that a million other things are done a certain way, but you're not asking it that. Or mine will give you a peak week, and it will. If you're peaking for a contest and you're like, shit, I don't know how to peak, my coach flaked, I don't try, or whatever, go to Troponin IQ, get all your data in, say, write me a peak week, and it'll write you a peak week that works. It should, yeah, because I realize that in my podcasts and articles and books and everything that all the files, I just say peak week. And so for a minute, it was struggling to differentiate peaking for a powerlifting meet, peaking for an MMA. But I think it's been trained enough now, because it gets so good so fast that by the time we realize something, by the time we start working to improve it, it's had so many new data that it's already trained itself. So it's pretty, but yeah, if you can say, write me a contest prep diet, it'll write a diet, right? And it'll be a diet as Justin Harris, his brain decides you needed a diet. You ask ChatGPT, and Justin Harris is in there as one of 10 trillion parts, but so is Steve Dickwad, who's never done a contest, who likes to talk about it all the time on the internet.
No, for sure. I fed ChatGPT some check-in photos to ask it to like assess my leanness. And I fed it the same photo twice. It was a side-by-side comparison, right? Same photo twice, and it gave me a different assessment the second time.
Yeah, and we're getting a lot of comments on that, because I get so many people saying like, yeah, get photo analysis and I'll buy it. It's like, we can do photo analysis, but we're at that level. Yeah. We're going to do it, but I'm not going to implement it until I feel like someone can use it and as if they're working with a coach. It's not going to be like you're working with a top coach out of the gate. It'll get trained to that eventually, but I'm not going to release it until we can avoid what you just said.
For sure. So I do want to talk about your supplement company, but actually, I'm curious, are you using AI in any way to directly support your formulation or marketing or any aspect of that business?
Not really yet. And I'm kind of torn with that, because my worry with the AI, so my whole life I've loved like sports and science, and you don't know what you're going to do, and you kind of think you're going to grow up and just be some cog in the wheel, but you kind of wish you could do something that contributed something to the world. And when I started coaching, at first it's like, wow, this is great. You're really impacting these people's lives, but you're only impacting a life, this person or that person. And it adds up over time, but you're not impacting society. So I was excited about the supplements because one of the things with my supplements and our developers for the AI think this is crazy, because they think we're leaving money on the table, and I'm sure we are, but I won't produce a supplement unless I take it. And so if you notice, we started with certain supplements like a test booster that my partners really wanted, that I no longer produce because I wouldn't take it. I want to say it doesn't work, but it didn't work well enough for me to spend money on it. And so I don't want someone else to spend money on it. So Not so much yet, because I really want to be careful. I don't want anything I do to be AI. I want you to feel like you're working with a real person, and that allows me to kind of focus with our AI. Then I can just focus just on that. I'm not sidetracking it on other things. But I think uh, eventually, probably not for so much for formulations, is kind of differently. It'll be more like, because as a smaller company, we're really tied to profit margins. We don't have the economy of scale. We can't, massive companies can produce protein powder as at a loss. They can lose $1 a jug because so many people buy protein, and as long as they can calculate that a certain percentage of people who also go to the site to buy protein are going to buy one of these products that they make high margins on, and they can do things like that. When we get to that level and it's really fine tuning things, then I'm sure I will. Or like if I'll, because we have to make concessions with the formulations where, like Suppressor Max, I really wanted 6 capsules. We're 7 because I wanted to say 1 capsule per meal. Most
Mhm.
people eat 6 meals, and we really tried, but I just couldn't get the formulation I wanted. There were certain things that I felt guaranteed it was the best berberine based product on the market, and I didn't want to lose that just to get 6 capsules. But down the road, I'm sure I can have I'll be able to use my IQ, my AI, Troponin IQ, and I'll ask it to analyze all these studies that combine berberine with sodium caprate, berberine sodium caprate, and piperine, fenugreek, RALA in different ratios, and say, see if they can find a mixture where there's a clear drop off in efficacy. And if there's some level of these combinations where we're guaranteed efficacy of the higher amounts, and that allows me to mix them into 6 capsules instead, then I'll do that. And you could, but that's still something you could do manually. It would just take a lot of reading research papers and a lot of work where AI will bypass. So I'm down the road. Eventually, we'll definitely do that. But for now, uh, I just kind of view it as I'm not trying to. I don't want to use it to like cost cut and like nickel and dime. Right as for right now, I'm going. What's my best formula? If I, I'm a, I view myself as someone who's trying to turn pro or a professional bodybuilder or very serious about this. And also, if you say some people are going to be rolling their eyes like, oh yeah, PED user talking about supplements. If you look at the supplements we produce, you'll notice a certain thing. Who benefits more from amino acids and high molecular weight carbohydrates inter-workout than someone on PEDs? Who benefits more from someone with improved insulin sensitivity than someone using GH? Who benefits more from organ, health like liver and kidney health than someone who's, so if you notice, the supplements I produce are true to form. They're supplements that benefit PED users both in health and in progress.
Yeah, your target demographic is clear for sure. So
Yeah, and that same thing. Every time we work with the marketing team, they get like all mad and they want me to go more Gen Pop with it, and I just can't. I'm sure at some point I'll be a whore and sell out completely to money, probably. But for now, it's like my baby, and I've refined the products down to the 9 products that have a very clear application, all the way to like our ATP and Go pills are both kind of not. They have a lot of crossover because they're both kind of fat burners, but ATP has much more like mental boosting, productivity. And then Go Pills has green tea and yohimbine, which is a different. So I really like I'm refined down to 9 products that like our 9 products that I do use and I would use as a competitor. And yeah, I guess so. We could sell out, and we actually formulated an electrolyte product because I don't like LMNT. I don't like the ratio of electrolytes because it's not the ratio humans really lose through sweat, and definitely not what we lose through like speaking. When you talk, you're losing moisture. And so I think it's not I don't like the mix that much, and so I wanted to do a better formulation, and we're calling it LMNOP instead of element. But uh, but our marketing people want me to do like real Gen Pop stuff that you can produce for pennies and so expensive, but I won't do it, and it is what it is. The nice thing is it's easy to market because I have a very clear target. I'm not targeting the 80-year-old dudes. Or I'm not targeting to like kids who I can rip off with some crappy pre-workout. I'm targeting the people who know what they're doing. And so every one of our products, you can look at the label and you can be someone who knows what the label means and see that our product is good and designed for a reason. And it's not designed to trick 18-year-olds into buying a shit product or trick middle-aged men into buying a test booster that won't work.
When you think about designing a product, do you start first at the conceptual level? Do you start first with thinking about what someone might need, or do you start with a thing that does a thing? Right? So suppressor max, glucose disposal agent. Do you start thinking bodybuilders need greater insulin sensitivity, or do you think, hey, berberine works, what can I do with berberine?
I think what they need, because I'm a like a function guy. What my clients will benefit from. Now that doesn't stay all the way through, because that's where suppressor came from. Suppressor Max was then developed that we have this product. How can I improve it with ingredients? And that's when we added the sodium caprate, which is a permeability enhancer and really makes a dramatic difference to berberine. Because the problem with berberine is unless you're taking it like every 2 hours, you're not getting stable blood levels of berberine. It just breaks down so quick, so few of it, so little of it gets across the small intestine. So, everyone goes to dihydroberberine, which is more bioavailable. So at first I thought, well, let's find the cost of that and move to that. But then I started reading the research studies and it's like, well, yeah, it does seem to be more bioavailable, but what are the blood glucose levels of dihydroberberine users versus berberine users? And they're not different. So whatever it's doing, it's getting in the bloodstream better. It's not exerting better effects, And so then I found sodium caprate, and there's a couple permeability enhancers. There's like a 10 carbon chain fatty acid and an 8 carbon chain fatty acid. You can even use things like cyclodextrins, which is kind of what highly branched cyclodextrins are. Those are beta cyclodextrins, but if you use like is it alpha or gamma? Alpha, I think, is the bigger one. Alpha ways are usually bigger, but alpha is an 8 carbon chain, so it's slightly larger, and so sometimes nutrients can get stuck in that cone, that highly branched cone. Because that's what cyclodextrins are. They're like a cone where it's hydrophilic on one side, hydrophobic on the other. That's how Febreze worked. Febreze and forget it. You spray it, the stink gets stuck in the cone, and then at some point, a week later, a month later, a day later, whatever, when you wipe it with water, that reverses that and that's why it works. And so I thought about that for a little bit, but berberine doesn't fit. It wouldn't work. Liposomal deliveries, I thought, but the data on those, and you see a lot of people produce those, and I didn't even look at the price because the research wasn't sound. But then you look at permeability enhancers, and they do work dramatically. Like with sodium caprate, blood levels of berberine at hour 4 are almost twice as high as berberine alone at hour 2. So twice, so not only 2 times longer, but even higher at that 2 times longer point. So it's like, okay, that's great, but are we getting another dihydroberberine case where, yeah, it's more bioavailable, but it's not doing anything? But then you can find there's data points or there's research studies that actually they give the number and they average all the participants, and it's berberine with sodium caprate improved blood glucose levels about 22.5% better than berberine alone. So I thought, okay, these, permeability enhancers, these are the way to go. Why is no one doing it? Well, I found out why no one's doing it because it's expensive. And then also, sodium caprate's an 8 carbon chain fatty acid. There's a 10 carbon chain fatty acid that also works fairly equal, but it's hard on the gut, and it can cause like leaky gut stuff. So we removed the 10 we didn't go with that. We went with the 8 carbon chain. So in that case, I had a product. How do I improve it with another ingredient? But it started as the result. Yeah.
I know that you're not a pharmaceutical company, so this isn't a leading question, but is it possible for you to trial products? How do you approach that? How do you think about that?
Oh, I mean, yeah, we can trial. I mean, anything that's not scheduled, you can, and it's really weird because you can get away as someone who's purchased things that you're not technically allowed to purchase throughout most of my life on the internet, and it's not easy. It's really shocking how easy it is if you have a company that's properly properly built and listed, and the articles of incorporation are such that this is your business. It's not hard. Yeah, I mean, you find manufacturers, because it's not like I'm not synthesizing these chemicals in my house, So everyone's got there's most 80% of the world's like I'd say pharmaceutical chemicals, but that's like any chemical that's produced in pharmaceutical level labs, with just like a graded flooring, certain air circulations, which is what your supplement should be. if you're on Amazon, you can kind of trust that because Amazon forces you to go through third-party testing and prove that you've met these manufacturing processes. So you can kind of trust that your company's buying, pharmaceutical level core ingredients when they make their products if they're on Amazon. But uh, so you find these manufacturers and then you build a rapport with them, and now we've been doing it for years, and so they even search you out, like this company that they want to get the corporate contract with you or whatever, but it's not hard to get samples. It's awesome actually. That's how, like, the 4-DMA and ATP, like, I got it's because it's so potent. You're only taking like 5 or 10 milligram doses. Well, no one's going to ship you 100 milligrams or 10 milligrams. So you get like a sample is like as a person almost a lifetime supply. So that stuff's really cool. Because we tried and that actually started. I was looking at not the 4-DMA 7,8 dihydroxyflavone. I was just looking at the 7,8 dihydroxyflavone, and partly because I was looking at nootropics and stuff and looking kind of for stim-free pre-workouts. And that compound is interesting because it's been around long enough that it actually has a brand name. It's not produced anywhere, but it's actually got a name. It's not just the chemical, and that name is tropoflavone. And I thought it was tropo. Come on. But then I was reading more into it, and I was like, holy shit! Like if you add like a 4-DMA molecule to that 7,8 to that tropoflavone, it has a whole new world of cool stuff like stimulatory effects, brain focusing effects. And so that's kind of how that came about. If you're starting out, you got to find people who manufacture it. But once you establish as a company, Hunter, pretty much everyone in the world, every major manufacturer, you have some kind of contact with.
No, for sure makes sense. I have a very specific question. Just curious as to your thought on this. So for something like, I know you sell an Astragalus root product. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, that there's lots of purported benefits, but it's often used by people to help protect and improve kidney health. With that supplement specifically, if someone doesn't see a concomitant rise in, or I guess a rise in EGFR, a decrease in BUN, decrease in creatinine, does that mean that it's not necessarily effective, or is it possible that it could still be efficacious even if your blood results aren't improving?
It doesn't guarantee that it's not, but I don't want to. I mean, I'm not going to say what anyone else is doing, but I source Astragalus and I know the quality difference, and I think Dante has kind of hinted at this, and not same thing because they're a big company that you don't want to like say the name. I think he said the first letter with the name. It's not like a supplement company; it's a big name company, And if you say the first letter, it's not a common letter. It's not like RSTLNE. It's one of those ones towards the back of the alphabet.
Sure.
And people seem when they take it, they don't get the benefits. And so there is a difference. Like if you just get Astragalus and you get like garbage bin Astragalus from like a city in China that you've never even heard of, it might be Astragalus, because it's a root, and because you can get ephedrine that's a different. I can't remember if it's genus and species, a different genus of the same species that has zero catecholamines in it, zero actual stimulatory effect. So it's still the same plant, still the same name, but that ephedra viridis is now ephedra whatever, some other thing that you're not legally required to list on the label. You can just say ephedrine alkaloids or ephedra alkaloids. And so it's one of those things. But if you have good Astragalus produced in a way that doesn't degrade it, and it includes some form of you're probably going to want like a cinnamon, or you're probably going to want something else. You're going to want something, I won't say, because I really don't want to say anyone else's products are good or aren't good. You're gonna want the right combo and the right core Astragalus that you start with for it to work the best. But if it does, and you can see the reviews on our site. I mean, when it works, it works. When it's real, it works. And there's only really one big name brand that I've seen that I'm pretty confident they're scraping the bottom of the barrel when they're sourcing it.
Well, yeah, I like the analogy you used about amphetamine, right? It makes sense. Also, marijuana is another good one, right? Like not all pot is created equal. You can buy a lot. It's all the same genus, right? It's all the same plant, but it's going to get you high in different ways. And I think
amphetamine is a perfect one actually, because there's chirility in molecules. There's left-handed and right-handed. So all our amino acids are left-handed. That's why it's L-tyrosine.
Yeah, right.
It isn't R-tyrosine. We just don't do shit with it. And same thing with carbs. Like dextrose is right-handed glucose. It's dextro-rotary glucose, dextro rotation through like a light spectrometer. And so there's correlative with that. Amphetamines. So you take an R amphetamine, a dextro-rotary, a right-handed amphetamine, boom, you got speed. You take a left-handed amphetamine, you have a vasoconstrictor that might clear out your nasal passages. But they're both amphetamine.
Amazing. Yeah. I've got kind of a out of left field question that is just something I've thought about years ago. I think this is actually the first place I ever saw you. So years ago, you did an interview with Pete Rubish. This was,
Yeah,
I think,
right.
before I think he was still enhanced at the time.
Yeah, I was working with him. We
Direction.
just started working together. We were going for a 900 deadlift. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember it was an awesome conversation, and I just remember one of the things that you seemed to impress upon him was that he really hadn't paid enough attention to his diet and body composition, and there was just gains left on the table. And I'm
Oh,
curious,
yeah.
is that, you as someone who's populated, you were a power lifter, you work with bodybuilders, you work with strength athletes, is that something you see in general among strength athletes? Is that they're just too focused on taking Anadrol and training really hard for 16 weeks and not really thinking about some of the minutiae that we've talked about here?
Well, I mean, outside of 308 class and plus, but even 308s now, look at your top 242, 272, 220-pound power lifters versus those same weight classes 20, 30 years ago. Those guys they look like bodybuilders now for a reason. And it's not a one-to-one correlation. Otherwise, every bodybuilder would be the strongest. And that's partly because bodybuilding is about making the muscle bigger, where the more than double of the space in your muscle isn't muscle. It's water and other things that you can accentuate those things with cellular volumization, high volume training, blood flow training, increasing blood vessel density, capillary density, the diameter of your veins, your arteries, increased nutrient uptake, fluid levels. That's like growth hormone bringing water. So there's more than double the room to increase muscle size by non-muscle growth than there is muscle growth. And so it's not a one-to-one correlation. But if you have a larger muscle with more protein structures to contract, it's going to be stronger. And that's just the difference, is that bodybuilders, if a good bodybuilder really needs to not focus on the muscle, they need to focus on those other things, where a powerlifter only focuses on the muscle. But both of those, in both cases, the results of whatever you're trying to work on are optimized when nutrient intake is optimized, And again, it's not, genetics, like neural connectivity, excitement, those things play a big enough role that you can get pretty far without doing it. And you can look at that in any sport. Like Lawrence Taylor would do cocaine on the sidelines and still tear it up. But can you imagine, like, if Lawrence Taylor had, like, it was as precise with his diet as like a Tom Brady was, or like a Christian McCaffrey? Imagine how good he would. You're always going to be better. Now you're talking a few percentage points, where, like, a Larry Wheels' natural gift for strength, is going to be, it's not a few percentage points above the average person. It's many percentage points above the average person. However, if two people both have Larry Wheels' amazing genetics for strength, and one person is dead on dialed in with nutrition and supplementation and the other one isn't, that's when those food percentage points matter. So they always make you better. They're not always going to be the difference maker.
Yeah, Larry Wheels is a really good example. I mean, he's no disrespect to the man at all. He's incredible, but it is very clear that some of his injuries are the result of his decision making. And you can just imagine a different Larry Wheels with the same incredible genetics who had made slightly different decisions and would have probably had a lengthier, more successful career. Again,
that's another one. If you like to play devil's advocate and talk about like how all these things come into play, there's a guy, Graham Benzinger, an interviewer. And if anyone's been around long enough to remember the old SNLs with Chris Farley, he used to do that interview where he'd be, that guy was really bad at interviewing. Like, he interviewed Paul McCartney one time and he kind of stumbled. Graham Benzinger, that's how he interviews. And somehow this guy's got like this amazing position where he's interviewing all these like amazing sports athletes. But it cracks me up because every time he interviews some ex, like a Lawrence Taylor, a Dennis Rodman, or some ex, like Terry Bradshaw, and he thinks they're going to be like angels, like praying at church the night before the Super Bowl. And they're telling these stories about going out and banging hookers, at 2 a.m. the night before the Super Bowl. And it's like, you were drinking alcohol before the biggest game? And it's like, yeah, because these guys are fucking animals. But that's what makes, that same animal if he was drinking protein shakes and getting a good night's sleep, would be even better. But it's the fact that he's an animal that makes him a superstar,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like a Larry Wheels, to go back to that. yes, he could have done better without some of those choices, but it's having that, like, probably not, like if you went and saw a medical professional, they'd say you're not right in the head, having that is also why he was so good, but
Yeah.
it also caused him to do dumb things like, 220-pound double inclines, when he's depleted, whatever, and so it is what it is. But you also, if you don't have that mentality, you don't get to that level. So it's always a hard mix. But that's also why guys don't stay on the top forever, because the type of person who makes it to that level is an extreme person, and they're not just extreme in this one area of their life. Altar boys don't become, NFL Hall of Famers usually. But the type of person who becomes an NFL Hall of Famer is also very likely to get themselves into a lot of other pretty not good situations.
No, for sure. I think that to me, that's part of the reason why when people talk about how PEDs influence things like mood and anger, I think you also have to take into account the population using those substances, right? These are people who are risk takers. These are people who either are alpha males or want that kind of thing, right? And they're probably more likely to be impulsive. They're probably more emotionally driven. And then they're taking something that may or may not exaggerate that. You're going to
Yeah,
like,
I always felt like that whole thing is very tightly shaped by the fact that that's how it's presented. I think if when steroids were first came out, if that wasn't the narrative, and the narrative instead was that you take these and you're going to become a very confident man and productive and kick ass in the workforce, and people are going to look at you like a leader, and everyone was like, oh, when I take these, I'm going to be confident and a leader, and and take charge of my life. It's the exact same chemical, but it'd be very easy to guide people into that path with it, because I never noticed. I mean, I've been on stuff for so long, it's hard to remember, but I never noticed any of that. If anything, I would say it makes, I would argue, like if someone would have told me you're going to take this, you're going to be more calm and confident and like stoic and like precise with your choices, I would say, yeah, that's exactly what I felt. But those same things are not that different from, being like, like focused can be, a slight angle change, and you're focusing on, beating someone up at a stoplight,
yeah, I would say aggression and focus are almost exactly
Yeah,
the same.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
depends
Yeah.
what.
Same with, and work ethic and drive, the
Yeah.
same person who's incredibly driven to be super successful in their field could have, with a few different changes early in their life, could have been super aggressive with basically the same, it's like the same neurochemical output, only just a few little minor things, angling them at the start, a tenth of a degree in that direction rather than this direction.
Well, this has been awesome. We covered a lot of topics. Is there anything that you wanted me to ask you, or anything you want to bring up at the end?
You never asked me how my day was.
I didn't know. I was all business, man. I'm sorry. I used you.
No,
Used
it's a
you.
long one. No, this is great. Because I got another thing in like 15 minutes, and I was worried. This flew by. Actually, I would do this again. I don't think I have anything. I just want to, I can't state enough. I wish people, Troponin IQ at the price point it is right now is never going to be a huge profit maker for us, because you know, every single one of my ebooks can be pulled from Troponin IQ if you ask it the right things. Every single word in every ebook, and so you're talking, $1,000 of content, and you could do that within the first 20 minutes of using Troponin IQ. So the deal is incredible. But I just really want people to use it. Because the more use we get out of it, the better we can train it. And I think it's going to be, it could be a real game changer, because it's essentially, people DM me. I mean, I feel bad because I can't even imagine what these like coaches with big followings. I hate social media, so I don't have a big social media presence. And I've been in the game long enough where there's enough word of mouth with my coaching. I've never had to advertise. So I could vanish from Instagram forever, and I don't think my coaching would ever really be impacted. The supplements and stuff would. But I think it's so many DMs I can't answer. All these people asking questions, and every time I think that, I'm like, man, all these people just trying to get help, but they don't want to pay the price of a coach. You don't have to. You'll get all those answers. If you ever wanted to ask me anything about fitness, it's all right there. And I mean, and if you can be a dick about it, sign up for a month and then cancel, and just spend a month asking questions 10 hours a day, and you'll get a PhD in in bodybuilding, and for $29.99. That's the big one. I mentioned Amazon earlier. We're almost fully on Amazon. We just started putting stuff on Amazon. We were just kind of slow with it. I think Go Pills, they still haven't received our third party or our that proof of our manufacture, but whatever. But we're almost fully on Amazon. So if, one of the big things with a small company is shipping. We don't have Amazon's shipping ability. I got a high school kid packing up products, that calls in sick or what, you know what I mean? So if you want next day delivery of our stuff, go to Amazon.
Great, man. Yeah, thanks. This is awesome. Really appreciate
Yeah.
your time.